2, 1.
Well, my friends, after the last few weeks of anticipation as SpaceX geared up for the next epic Starship mission with Flight 13, today has been an amazing day. After that last-second engine abort, engine swaps, weather delays, and this anxious week of waiting, it all worked out nicely for us. Given we were on holiday last week, we returned to these epic scenes, and wow, there is just so much to dive into with this one. So let's jump straight into it.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
Hey, Marcus House with you here, and boy, it has been a roller coaster over the last couple of weeks leading up to Flight 13. It hasn't all been smooth sailing, obviously. Of course, SpaceX originally wanted to launch on Thursday the 16th of July, just a little over a week ago, but Murphy had other plans. Yes, the disappointed crowd watched the engines fire up and then nothing. Indeed, this was the first time ever that Starship aborted the flight after engine ignition. Engines needed to be swapped for the next attempt, so yeah, unlike Pad 1 where they had access to the aft of the booster, the entire vehicle needs to be destacked on Pad 2. So the vehicles were rolled back to the megabays, the Super Heavy had at least 5 engines switched out, and this week they rolled back out again for Flight 13. It was scheduled to fly on Thursday initially, but due to the weather, SpaceX bumped that forward another 24 hours. This was critical, especially for this mission, because one of the key objectives was to get clear ground imagery of how the higher dynamic stresses on this flight would affect the heat shield. Obviously, they wouldn't get that with low visibility. With the beast restacked, here we were on Friday morning with launch coverage finally underway. Pad 2 once again looked absolutely clean and spectacular. There is something about seeing this fully stacked vehicle covered in frost that still doesn't seem quite real. There it is, standing over 120 metres tall, powered by 33 Raptor engines capable of producing well over 8,000 tonnes of thrust. It is difficult to comprehend just how enormous this machine really is. Even after watching Starship for years now, that countdown never gets any less nail-biting. As the final seconds ticked away, we were just waiting for that detonation suppression system to burst into life beneath the orbital launch mount, and here we go.
1.
Yes, once again, all 33 engines were lit beautifully, and just look at that acceleration as it roars away from the pad. That incredible violence blasting out from each engine almost merges together in this smooth plume that instead appears beautifully controlled. It almost seems impossible actually, and this may indeed just sit on that boundary of what is possible. There is that full Starship stack there, 9 metres in diameter, and the height of a 40-storey building somehow just almost casually accelerating into the sky with far more thrust than anything humans have ever built. If you are new to this, the combined thrust of those engines is putting out almost 2.5 times the liftoff thrust of the mighty Saturn V that sent astronauts to the moon, and future versions of Starship are planned to do plenty more than that again. Soon enough, the vehicle approached max Q, the point of maximum aerodynamic stress, so this would have been a key moment for every engineer to be watching the many streams of telemetry data rolling in. Starship, from what we could see, simply powered straight through. Now, one thing I immediately noticed was just how incredibly clean the ascent looked. Those Raptor 3 engines produced that almost translucent blue exhaust plume thanks to the methane-oxygen propellant mix. The day was so clear that you could see Starbase beautifully below disappearing out of view. Just awesome, some of these shots. As we had learned with the flight information published last week, Flight 13 here was intentionally pushing the vehicle harder than any previous Starship mission to date through the lower atmosphere. SpaceX wanted to expose both the structure and especially the thermal protection system, or the heat shield, to even higher dynamic pressures than before. They even mentioned they had new load sensing tiles aiming to take measurements throughout the entire flight, but were mainly there to test their attachment pins to this higher stress environment. Remember, every bit of performance they can safely squeeze out of the ascent translates directly into more payload that they can eventually deliver to orbit, so I'm expecting they'll keep pushing this even more over the next few missions. Now, a few neat key speed data points for you here compared to the previous Flight 12. At the 1 minute mark, the Starship in this mission was already moving about 200 kilometers per hour faster. At 90 seconds, that was doubled at almost 400 kilometers per hour faster, and it was already over 1.5 kilometers in altitude higher. That's crazy. Now, after the issues in the previous Flight 12, SpaceX had identified a number of key areas that they wanted to improve. The most critical was obviously the hot staging sequence that accidentally sent the Super Heavy almost 90 degrees in the wrong direction before boost back. Well, that brings us to this moment that we had all been waiting for.
6, ignite.
Burn startup.
Now, sadly, they didn't stream the camera view of the hot staging shot from outside the vehicle like we normally see. Wow though, we did get this shot from inside the Super Heavy engine bay instead. That was very welcome and unexpected. Another neat data point here too. At the moment we see the Super Heavy shutting down its engines, it was about 4 seconds or so earlier than in Flight 12 with about 200 kilometers per hour difference. Very clear improvements there. In this mission, SpaceX had specifically modified that startup sequence to define the flip direction far more reliably. As most engines cut off or MECO approached, 28 of the 33 booster engines shut down just like we saw on Flight 12. Remember, they keep an extra 2 lit now. If you then look closely at the engine startup sequence for the upper stage Starship, just as we saw with this ship's static fire, these 2 vacuum engines fire up first, the sea level engine there next, and that gives it the kick to flip up toward space. Thanks to this incredible shot released by SpaceX soon after the stream, we actually did get this view from the booster as it flips away from the ship. The moon is in the background there too, by the way. Nice. Anyway, the orientation here shows that it flipped in the perfect direction this time, and that is exactly what they wanted. We then see those booster engines fire up in that super aggressive boost back. Given this is only the second mission where SpaceX has been using the new Raptor 3 engines, which of course are much more powerful and super refined from the old Raptor 2s, it's great seeing this entire sequence going perfectly to plan. This boost back sequence is just so much faster with that gigantic thrust. All those remaining engines had relit as planned this time, and in just moments the boost back sequence was done. Now, interestingly, on the statement released after by SpaceX, the boost back was stated to have ended early. From what we had seen, everything looked very smooth there, so I'm not sure how off target it may have been at this point. It slowly flipped back around to prepare to plunge back into the atmosphere aft first. In this mission, the booster was planning to come down for a controlled splashdown in the ocean. With the new version 3 Super Heavy, SpaceX has 3 larger grid fins instead of the 4 in the previous versions. Sadly though, for the last 2 flights with version 3, we haven't seen any views of the grid fins in action, which is a bummer. I'm hoping they do have some cameras on them and can at some point share some of these views, but so far nothing. As the atmosphere gets thicker, we wanted to see it being smoothly controlled and steering nicely through that hypersonic phase of the entry, and this was all looking great. The dynamic pressures through this mad process are still one of those things that somehow feels futuristic every single time. Remember, there is no entry burn like with Falcon 9, so it just rips into the atmosphere at this colossal speed. The big question though, was it coming in on target? Well, it was all certainly improved here from the last attempt in Flight 12, but clearly that was a hard splashdown. Replaying this, we can see that out of the 13 engines that were supposed to light up, 10 ignited. 2 of those here rapidly shut down, leaving the 8, and that was reduced to 5 as it then hits the water. There's certainly more progress to be made here, so I suspect Flight 14 may not go for the super heavy catch like we were hoping. As far as the less than optimal results go though, that was literally it, so strap in. This mission was incredible. Right, so rewinding and getting back to the upper stage, while Booster 20 began making its way home, Ship 40 simply kept accelerating along smoothly. In Flight 12, SpaceX had obviously lost one of the vacuum engines early on soon after stage separation, but not today. This was in fact looking wonderful. One thing I was again looking forward to throughout the ascent was the engine bay itself. It's awesome just how much cleaner the version 3 aft section has become compared with the earlier Starships. You've got that simplified Raptor 3 plumbing, much less thermal shielding, and just a less cluttered engine compartment overall, so it all seems to be working out nicely. Given the aft has had all sorts of issues in earlier versions, everything here looked remarkably calm throughout the rest of the burn. There was that vacuum Raptor shutdown, followed moments later by the sea level engines, and just like that, Ship 40 was coasting along after a flawless ascent. The reaction control thrusters had quietly taken over, of course, keeping the vehicle precisely oriented while preparing for the next major milestone. Now this was the point where Flight 13 became something quite different to every Starship mission that came before it. Tucked away inside that payload bay wasn't just another handful of simple mass simulator satellites. No, in this mission, SpaceX had packed 20 full version 3 Starlink satellites on board for the first time. I'll come right back to that, but first a big thank you to Outskill for sponsoring today's video. AI technology is one of those topics that seems to divide people more than almost anything else right now. Some people are incredibly excited about where it's heading, while others have genuine concerns about how it's being used. Like any major technological leap, there's going to be both incredible opportunities and challenges that society needs to navigate. We're seeing AI tools help researchers analyze enormous amounts of scientific data, accelerate drug discovery, improve medical imaging, and even assist with developing new treatments to improve people's lives. At the same time, there's obviously plenty of conversations to be had around misinformation and just responsible use. I think the more people that there are who actually understand the positive tools, the better equipped we will all be. That's exactly where Outskill comes in. It's an AI-focused education platform built to help you understand and apply these technologies in useful ways. This pulls together insights from over 100 companies like Microsoft and Nvidia, and it's completely free. Right now, you can sign up for their 2-day live AI mastermind happening this weekend, packed with around 16 hours of live training designed for a global audience. In just those 2 days, you'll do deep research with Claude and build your own artifacts and dashboards, create full presentations and get hands-on with Claude Code. You'll build custom agents, generate visuals and videos with AI, and walk away able to put your whole week on autopilot. If you sign up now, you'll also get over $5,000 worth of bonuses, including a full AI prompt library, 50 secret Claude codes that turn it into a god-tier tool, and a personalized AI toolkit builder. Outskill has already reached over 10 million people across more than 100 countries, so it is well worth checking out. If you'd like to learn more, just scan the QR code there on screen or use the link in the description there below. Thank you, Outskill. Okay, you've just got to check out the full version 3 Starlink satellites on board here. Although these were destined to burn up only around 20 minutes later, this gave SpaceX the first good chance to put them through some real operational testing in space. The payload bay door slowly began opening, and just like the previous mission, each was being precisely pushed out. Would we again get to see some neat camera views from the perspective of the satellites themselves though? Well, sadly not, because they didn't have the same sort of camera systems on them this time around, but what we did get to see instead was something never seen before. The final 6 satellites in the stack were equipped instead with special cameras specifically tasked with looking back towards Ship 40 and scanning over the heat shield and the rest of the ship. To do that, the ship needs to be lit up though, right? After all, on this side of the planet, in the darkness, it doesn't feel like these shots would be very useful. Well, cue those spotlights that were also on the deployed satellites. Check this out, this is so cool. Now this is a similar sort of idea to what was done with the space shuttle with the rendezvous pitch maneuver. With those, the International Space Station crew captured the underside of the orbiter before re-entry, but in this case it is all automated using multiple perspectives. The future really is awesome. I'm still hoping we may get to see some views posted from the perspectives of the Starlink satellites themselves, but so far SpaceX hasn't posted anything around that. Now, a few moments after the cargo had been emptied out and the door had closed, SpaceX shared this great camera angle where we were able to see the first train of Starlink version 3s slowly spreading out behind Ship 40. Given that these were the full Starlink satellites, SpaceX wanted to do the full deployment tests of their solar arrays. They wanted to extend their communication antennas and even test fire their onboard thrusters. In fact, they even wanted to have them connect up to the existing Starlink constellation before they eventually re-entered the atmosphere soon after. Well, they did confirm just minutes later in the stream that everything here was successful, so that is terrific news. It is so great to finally see a real payload with true capability. Everything here, as far as we could see, looked to have gone beautifully, and all 20 Starlink satellites had quietly drifted away. So, with payload deployment complete, SpaceX moved into the next critical objective for the upper stage, the in-space Raptor relight. If they could pull this off for the first time with the version 3 hardware, just like we have seen multiple times with the previous version, that should mean SpaceX could go fully orbital for Flight 14. That will be a first that we have been waiting for a long time. Even though it sounds like a relatively small milestone, there was that one engine starting back up, a successful in-space burn there, so it is very nice to see that finally ticked off. With that burn complete, Ship 40 began preparing for that crazy re-entry process. After the success even in Flight 12, we didn't really expect any huge issues with this phase of the mission. At almost orbital velocity, ploughing back into Earth's atmosphere at this speed gives us a brilliant light show, and in this mission that was no exception. I think plasma is so interesting to watch as it builds up. At these speeds, the air simply can't get out of the way fast enough, so instead we are seeing it getting super compressed into this scorching plasma that flows over the heat shield. If Starship is to indeed become rapidly reusable, this heat shield material needs to survive all this punishment with little to no damage. Just look at this. Somehow we get to watch an almost routine event where we follow this gigantic stainless steel spacecraft surfing its way through a river of superheated fury. It's a crazy thing. Given that Flight 13 followed that even higher energy ascent profile than previous missions, I couldn't see any issues on this entry. Once out of that and deeper into the atmosphere, SpaceX had once again programmed in that aggressive dynamic banking maneuver into the flight profile. They are still testing this because in the near future the upper stage Starship is going to return to be caught by the tower, but for a number of reasons they need to overshoot before realigning with the tower. This will give them some abort options and allow them to line up in the correct direction and simply have the tower grasp it out of the sky. Anyway, all that looked great, and here we had the final astounding descent as we prepared for the engines to relight for the flip.
3 sea levels lit. Seeing healthy chamber pressures on. Did our flip down to 2. Starship descending into the Indian Ocean, down to 1.
Yes, indeed, after ticking off all those mission objectives, the landing engine sequence fired up beautifully, that flip maneuver looked smooth and splashdown right on target. Now, as some sweet icing on this cake, amazingly for the first time the ship didn't explode as expected once it fell over into the ocean.
And it's a soft splashdown in the water. That is a first.
SpaceX has been trying to adjust the way it falls to see if keeping it intact was even possible, but what an awesome way to end this mission. There is a bit of a fireball there in the forward section, but that quickly extinguished itself. I've got to say, I can't wait to see the next documentary episode from SpaceX showing the perspective from the mission control team here, because with all the footage the drone operators were able to pick up here, the heat shields team especially will be over the moon with this. Now, we do see a few broken tiles, so there is still room for improvement, but they'll have a lot of data on this to sift through. I mean, the Starship itself was even still streaming views from the vehicle's cameras, such as from within the engine bay. Also, look at that flap camera too. You can even see here that the purge lines at the aft of the vehicle are still venting away, so it definitely looked like the ship survived very nicely, even though it wasn't expected. I guess my first thought now is, could they attempt to tow this back to land to inspect it even more? This idea has been floated around for years, so perhaps it is possible in the future. Exciting times. So yeah, looking back, most of the fixes following Flight 12 appear to have been successful, and that makes the next Flight 14 look like it will be a much more significant step forward, we hope, going fully orbital for the first time. Surprisingly, as posted here by Elon after, they are even looking at catching the ship as well for the first time if all new data checks out. It's going to be interesting to see what the plan is for the Super Heavy given the less than perfect boost back and landing burn, but yeah, they are certainly a lot closer now to being able to perform a tower catch again. Let me know what you think. Now, with all that, the vehicles for Flight 14 to follow, Super Heavy Booster 21 and Ship 41, have had progress as well, so they are getting very close to flight themselves. This week, the Super Heavy rolled out, completed its cryo campaign at Massey's, and has already rolled back for engine installation. With that, as far as we know, Ship 41 is getting its engines too, so they should be both ready for static fire in no time. I suspect we're going to have another flight in just weeks. Onward to Falcon 9 action. It has been a little out of the ordinary this week, I've got to say. Early in the week, here we were watching the final countdown at Space Launch Complex 40. The payload on top of this one, the Mission Robotic Vehicle and Mission Extension Pods, or the MRV-MEP. This was a crucial launch for Northrop Grumman, and what has become a quite unusual thing to see these days was a sacrificial Falcon 9 booster being used. Indeed, the booster requirement for this mission meant that SpaceX needed to expend this booster. Now, you can clearly see that this one didn't have legs or grid fins attached to increase that performance. Sadly, instead of using a really young booster that we don't really care a great deal about, this was booster 1069, now flying for the 32nd and final time. I mean, it makes total sense to use an old booster, I guess, but we still get a little attached to these ones that have quite an extensive history. I couldn't have said it any better than SpaceX's VP of launch here. This booster was nicknamed the OG Tippy rocket. This is because it came about as close as possible to being lost on its very first mission after sending NASA's CRS-24 Dragon on its way to space. With this one, the ocean landing was very tough because of the rough seas, and this was the result. Richard Angle at the time had a few views of it coming back in. All 9 engines needed to be replaced, in fact, and of course, it has since then gone on to do another 31 flights. Just amazing. Anyway, stage separation there, and look at the speed. It was already moving close to 10,000 kilometers per hour. We wave goodbye there to booster 1069, now completely empty, and that was left to plummet into the atmosphere at this ridiculous speed. Meanwhile, the payload on board the second stage for Northrop Grumman is all about increasing their in-orbit satellite servicing capability. This technology aims to help extend a satellite's life, which then obviously saves money and will help reduce future space junk. Of course, satellites these days are typically decommissioned when they run low on fuel, but Northrop Grumman already has their first generation of satellites helping with this problem. Mission Extension Vehicles 1 and 2 launched in 2019 and 2020 and have already extended the life of satellites in orbit. In this mission though, they've launched their second generation Mission Robotic Vehicle, which takes this satellite servicing effort to a whole new level. This has these robotic arms that can perform a variety of functions. They will install these mission extension pods, which are kind of like mini jetpacks. These are, I believe, smaller versions of the first generation. The mission robotic vehicle can also use its arms to repair satellites, relocate them for disposal, and even install new components onto satellites, so it's pretty amazing stuff. It's also, by the way, equipped with a passive refueling mechanism. Of course, SpaceX's side of the mission all went perfectly to plan. The mission ended soon after the second engine cutoff as per customer's request, but SpaceX confirmed successful deployment of all the payloads later, along with this incredible view of the second stage after payload deployment with our beautiful planet below. You've just got to love those views from way up there above in a geostationary transfer orbit. So other than that, just a little bit of Starlink action this week. The Group 1739 mission on Tuesday morning launched just as you would expect from Vandenberg Space Force Base, but rewinding just a little, the day before, a very unusual abort. Right at the T0 mark, the engine ignition sequence aborted partway through. That had SpaceX stand down just for the day without any more information, so whatever happened there, it can't have been too much of an issue because here it was shooting out of the atmosphere the very next day. This was booster 1082 on its 23rd mission, and no problems here. There was the touchdown on the drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, moments later. Now, a few weeks back, you may recall me talking about Blue Origin's launch bridge being taken out of the flame trench while still in the cleanup process after the New Glenn explosion at Launch Complex 36 at the end of May. That, of course, still left the huge launch table laying in the flame trench, but as we can see thanks to Dave's post here, the roughly £2 million or 900 metric ton launch table was on the move and heading to the integration facility for inspections. That suggests that it will mostly be reused, but will of course need modifications for the new launch site configuration coming. To be reinstalled at the next modified pad, it needs to be fitted with the first stage aft umbilicals and connected to the water deluge system. This feeds into the table and blasts water directly into the engine plume during liftoff. There's certainly a lot of work that needs to be done before it is reinstalled for a flight again, but hopefully they can make quick progress. Given that we are only a little over 5 months off the end of 2026, that suggested flight before the end of the year seems pretty optimistic to me at this point. The support tower, though, is also continuing to come down one section at a time, and at this point, they've removed 4 sections. Another awesome headline for the week is India successfully launching its very first private orbital class rocket thanks to Skyroot Aerospace. This in fact makes India the 3rd ever country to have successfully seen a private orbital class rocket launch. They join only the United States and China in that regard. Arguably we could include New Zealand in that, although technically Rocket Lab is an American company. This is Vikram 1 flying for its debut flight, and it is named Agaman, meaning arrival. That pitch over there almost looks aggressive. Now Skyroot was only co-founded in 2018, and the company has now managed to raise around $160 million, giving them a total valuation just over $1 billion. Vikram 1 is a 4-stage launch vehicle with the first 3 stages propelled by solid rocket motors. The final orbital adjustment module is then powered by the fully 3D printed liquid-fueled Grumman 2 engine. Interestingly, this is built almost entirely from an all-carbon composite structure, and this allows this relatively small rocket to carry a payload of around 350 kilograms to low Earth orbit. That actually gives it a slightly larger payload capacity than Rocket Lab's Electron, which can manage around 300 kilograms to orbit. Vikram 1 is a good chunk taller though, at about 24 meters tall versus Electron's 18. Obviously, these are configured very differently, but I find it handy to compare against something that is at least a familiar and a similar size. Now the primary mission objective was simply to lift off and clear the tower, but the rocket obviously blasted right through that stage and casually went on to perform the full secondary mission profile. I'm happy to say that we were also treated to some incredible onboard views too. The first stage with the Callum 1200 motor powered the vehicle through max Q just 39 seconds into flight before separating at around 1 minute and 40 seconds. Stage 2 there with the Callum 250 motor ignited a few seconds later, and that burned out to separate away a little over 3 minutes into the flight. The third and final solid rocket motor was away there with the Callum 100, which continues right up past the 5-minute mark. Engine cut off, and at this point the vehicle was already close to orbital speed, so a very high thrust to weight ratio. Now once that was separated away, it was really just coasting along there for a few minutes. However, as you can see, even after separation to prepare for the 4th stage burn, that 3rd stage just kind of hung around for a little bit. That was a little odd, and we assume that it must have just been loosely attached still by something. Now the 4th stage, which is named the Orbital Adjustment Module, features that 3D printed Grumman 2 engine along with the smaller Grumman mini thrusters for attitude control. Everything went beautifully with this too, and with 6 small spacecraft to deploy, it was a huge win. This, by the way, included a robotic arm demonstration which wasn't shown moving on the stream, but this unit you can see here almost hugging onto a payload. It is fittingly named Embrace. So yeah, it is pretty incredible to see Skyroot successfully pull off all this on the very first mission, so huge congratulations to everyone involved, and they are not stopping there of course, because the next mission is hopefully launching later this year. So there we go my friends, another very packed video right there. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, that subscribe button down there does not press itself. If you missed this video by the way, check it out. Thanks for watching all this way through as always. I'll catch you next week.
And it's a soft splashdown in the water. That is a first.